Hey YouTubers, welcome to the Cyber Overwatch channel. I am Pragmatic1. In this video, I will be tackling TryHackMe vulnerable host Pyrat. Before I do though, I'm going to walk you through following the penetration testing lifecycle from recon all the way through exploitation and post-exploitation. Because good hacking isn't just throwing tools at a box and hoping something sticks. It's a process, a methodology, and that's what separates a novice from a professional penetration tester. In this walkthrough, I'll cover the complete attack lifecycle, reconnaissance, enumeration, exploitation, and post-exploitation. Specifically, I'll be performing port scanning, service enumeration, authentication bypass, remote code execution, and privilege escalation. I will also go through how penetration testing lifecycle can align with the MITRE attack matrix. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. Also, for more free content, please regularly check back on www.cybersec.com. Pyrat is a vulnerable host created by TryHackMe. It's designed to simulate security weaknesses and give you hands-on practice with common attack vectors. This vulnerable host demonstrates several critical weaknesses such as remote code execution, unsecured credentials, password reuse, and brute forceable admin password. Now that that's covered, let's cover the penetration testing phases. Before I open a single terminal, I want to make sure that the framework that I am implementing is understandable. The ethical hacking lifecycle is a structured approach to offensive security. It's sometimes called the penetration testing lifecycle, but in general, the pen test lifecycle has more phases. There are 5 core phases, and I'm going to execute all of them on this vulnerable host except for the final phase. Phase 1, reconnaissance. This is the intelligence gathering phase. I'm figuring out what I'm working with before I even send a single packet. In an external engagement, this might mean passive OSINT using resources like Shodan, LinkedIn, Google. In a lab environment like this, I know the target IP, but reconnaissance still means understanding the scope, the technology stack, and what attack surface might exist. Phase 2, scanning and enumeration. I'll actively probe the target using methods like port scanning, service enumeration, and version detection. I want to know every possible attack vector on the target before I attempt to gain a foothold. Phase 3, exploitation, gaining access. This is where I weaponize what I've learned. I identify a vulnerability or misconfiguration and use it to establish a foothold on the vulnerable host. In a real engagement, this is the phase that requires the most creativity and technical precision. Phase 4, post-exploitation. In the post-exploitation phase, I'm on the vulnerable host. The question is now what? I'll want to escalate my privileges, move laterally, harvest credentials, and demonstrate business impact. In this case, for this walkthrough, I want to capture the flags. In a real pen test, this is where you prove to the client just how bad it could be. Phase 5, reporting. Every professional pen test ends with a report. I'm not going to write a report for this video, but I'll talk about what you document along the way. Because if you can't communicate your findings, it does not help your client. All right. When I look at the attack matrix, I can tie the techniques I will be using to the pen test lifecycle phases as well. On a side note, if you want to learn more about MITRE attack matrix, I did create a video providing a general understanding of its use. In general though, the vulnerable host attack surface does align with the following attack techniques. For this demonstration, I'm using TryHackMe's attack box. Using the TryHackMe attack box is okay if you don't have a pen test box set up like Kali with your own tools. I'll just use the attack box for now as I can just spin it up and I'm connected automatically. I've started the Pyrat vulnerable host and I've got my target IP. I'm going to store it in a variable to make my life easier throughout this walkthrough. Alright, I ran the following echo command and the target IP is locked in. Let me start phase 1. In a real world engagement, reconnaissance could take days or weeks. I'd be looking at DNS records, WHOIS data, job postings, employee LinkedIn profiles, anything that could give me intelligence about the target without touching it. Here in a controlled lab environment, my reconnaissance starts with the room itself. Looking at the room description, I know that this is a Linux system running some kind of Python-based rat service. That's a big hint. A remote access Trojan is a software designed to allow remote control of a machine, and if one is exposed on the network, that's a serious attack surface. Key things I'm noting for my mental model going into this is 1, Linux target. That means I'm thinking about Linux file paths, Linux privilege escalation vectors, and Linux users and permissions. 2, Python-based service. Python is an interpreted language with powerful built-in capabilities. If any part of that service evaluates or executes Python code without proper sandboxing, I may have direct command execution. 3, there's almost certainly SSH running, which means if I can grab credentials somewhere, I have a clean authenticated path in. With reconnaissance completed, I'm moving on to phase 2. The first thing I'm going to do is run a fast full port TCP scan to get a broad picture. I decided not to do service detection yet. I just want to know what ports are listening. The --min-rate flag tells Nmap to send packets no slower than 5,000 per second, which speeds things up considerably on the lab target. The $_o_n flag saves normal output to a file. If you are working on an engagement, always save your output. You'll be thankful later. On a typical Linux machine, you'll see port 22 for SSH, but Pyrat has something extra. Watch for non-standard ports in a higher range. This is where the interesting stuff is going live. As we can see, the scan completed, 2 ports are open, port 22, SSH, and port 8000. Port 8000 is what I care about. That's not a standard service port, so let me dig in deep. Now I'll run a targeted scan on those 2 ports with service fingerprinting and default scripts enabled. The $S flag performs a SYN-scan, $V flag probes for service versions, and the $C flag runs Nmap's default scripts collection, which can grab banners, identify software, and sometimes reveal useful information automatically. Port 22 shows OpenSSH, port 8000 is shown as an unknown service, Nmap isn't sure what it's talking to. That actually tells me something. This isn't a well-known protocol, it's something custom, and custom services are often where a real vulnerability hides. When automated tools don't give me a clear answer, I go manual. The simplest way to poke at an unknown TCP service is with netcat. Let me just connect and see what it says. I'll run the following netcat command shown in the CLI. After executing the netcat command, the service seems to be responding. It's giving me some kind of interactive prompt. This is the Python rat listening. It's waiting for input, and it's wide open on the network without requiring authentication. Let me try sending some basic input just to understand what it's accepting. I'll start with simple commands like help and who am I. Depending on what the service does with unrecognized input, I'll get either an error, nothing, or something interesting. What I'm trying to determine is, does this service evaluate my input as Python code? Because if it does, I essentially have a Python interpreter handed to me on a silver platter. Analyzing the output I received, this is classic behavior of an improperly secured Python socket server. The service is using Python's eval or exec function to process whatever I send it. That's my entry point. With the netcat session still open, let me try importing the OS module using Python's import function. Next, I'll try calling popen to execute the id command, which tells me what user the service is running as. Based on the output, I have confirmed remote code execution. The service is executing my Python code server side. I'm currently running as a low privilege user, but that's fine. I have a foothold. Working through a raw netcat connection is clunky and limited. What I want is a proper reverse shell, a shell session that calls back to my system so I have a full interactive terminal. First, let me set up my netcat listener in a second terminal. I ran the following netcat command shown in the CLI. Back to my connection to the target host on port 8000. I'll inject a reverse shell payload using Python. This tells the target machine to connect back to my system on port 1234 with a bash shell. Based on my netcat listener output, I'm in. I have a reverse shell on the target host. Anytime I land on a new box, I run through the same mental checklist. Who am I? What machine am I on? What is the OS in version? What users exist? What's running? Another option is using psng for host enumeration, but for the sake of this video, let me go through it. I chained the following commands: who am I, id, hostname, uname-a, and cat/etc/os-release. Looking at the output, I can see a lot of useful information. Now I'll run the following command shown in the CLI to see who lives on this box. When looking at this output, I need to take note of any user accounts with a real shell like /bin/bash. Those are in most cases human user accounts and often have interesting files in their home directories. TryHackMe rooms typically have a user.txt flag in their home directory. I can try to find them by running the following command shown in the CLI. Unfortunately, looking at the output, the command did not find the user.txt file. I ran the following command shown in the CLI to view the contents of the Think and Ubuntu users home directory. I got permission denied when trying to look at the Think users home directory, but the Ubuntu users home directory, I could see the contents. Unfortunately, there was nothing useful. With host enumeration done for the most part, let me see my possible path to privilege escalation. I usually start with low-hanging fruit, so at this time I'll start performing more information gathering. One command I'll run is sudo-l to see if I can run anything as root without a password. If sudo is available, this is often the quickest path. Unfortunately, I did not get anything due to my shell. For my next command, I'll run the following command shown in the CLI. It looks for suid binaries that run with the file owner's privileges regardless of who executes them. If root owns the suid binary and I can run it, I might be able to leverage it for escalation. The output provides a lot of possibilities that I can cross-check with GTFO bins, but for now, I'll continue information gathering. I'll run the following command shown on the CLI to determine whether Git is on the target. Git repositories are gold mines during post-exploitation. Developers often commit credentials, configuration files, or old versions of code that expose sensitive information. If I find one, I'll examine the commit history. Looking at the output, there appears to be a Git repository hosted on the target. Let me investigate. I'll run the following command shown on the CLI to change directories to the /opt/dev/.git folder. Once in that folder, the ls-la command will show me the contents including hidden folders and files. Looking at the output, there are a few files I will want to review, mainly the config file and the logs directory. The config file may hold interesting, possibly sensitive configuration information. The logs folder stores the reference logs, which are local temporary histories of every time a reference like head or a branch has been updated. I can also use the git log command to read the logs. The git log command shows me the commit history, useful when looking for anything in the history that might have been accidentally committed, like credentials, configuration changes, or old passwords. Developers often commit sensitive data and then usually try to remove it in the following commit, but Git never forgets. I'll run the following command shown in the CLI. I want to look at the config file first because there is only one file, while there may be several log files to review. Reviewing the contents of the config file shows possible credentials. I already know there is a user account called think when I ran the cat/etsy/passwd command earlier. Let me see if I can log in via SSH to the think user account. Using the credentials I obtained from the git config file, I'll attempt to log in via SSH. I'll run the following command shown in the CLI to determine if the credentials I found are valid. I get prompted to enter a password. Based on the output, it looks like the credentials I found in the git config file were valid. I can see the think user prompt. Now it's time to do some further enumeration. With working credentials and now logged in as the think user, I need to perform more enumeration to determine the path to root. Reviewing task 1 again, it notes that I have to create a custom script that brute forces endpoints and fuzzes for passwords in order to gain roots. From that, it looks like it's leading me back to Git for further investigation. But for now, I will run the following command shown in the CLI to change directory to the think user account, where I should hopefully find the first flag user.txt file. After running the ls-la command, I can see the user.txt file in the think user's home directory. I ran the cat command on the user.txt file to see the hash. I ran the following cd command shown in the CLI to return to the Git folder to investigate more thoroughly. I ran the cat command to read the commit edit message file. It notes added shell endpoint, which further points back to the Python rat or Pyrat. I ran the git log command shown in the CLI to view what info the logs contained. In the log, it provided a commit ID. I ran the following git show command shown in the CLI, and it shows the old Python script. Reviewing the script, I can see what it does. The entry point is an arbitrary code execution. The switch case function is designed to handle incoming traffic from a raw network socket. While it has some legitimate looking endpoint, the else block is a massive liability. It utilizes exec_python (client_socket, data), which effectively allows a remote attacker to send arbitrary Python byte code to be executed directly in our memory space. The script provides privilege escalation and persistence via the following. The script performs a check using os.getUID function. It identifies if it is running as root UID 0. The change_UID function call is particularly concerning. In a post-exploitation scenario, attackers often drop root privileges to a specific service account to blend in with standard system traffic and avoid triggering basic automated alarms that monitor for suspicious root activity. For interactive reverse shell, it implements the shell function, which is the most critical threat. It uses the PTY and OS modules to perform file descriptor hijacking. Redirection, it uses os.dupe2 to bind the system's standard input, output, and error streams 0, 1, and 2 directly to the network socket. Execution, it then spawns /bin/sh. Looking at the Python script, it looks as if shell is an endpoint that I might be able to connect to. I ran the following netcat command shown in the CLI to reconnect back to Pyrat. I entered shell, and when I hit enter, I got a $sign indicating that I have a user prompt. I typed who am I, and it shows me as www-data service account. This confirms that Pyrat is exploitable. After reviewing the Python script in the Git history and discovering that when entering shell, I automatically get logged in as the www-data service account, it is confirmed that the service running on port 8000 allows remote access to the target host. That Python script says some endpoint, which means there may be more than shell. I created a Python script that will fuzz endpoints. I'll run the following command shown in the CLI to fuzz all available endpoints. After running the fuzzer, I get some interesting output. The output shows shell with a $sign prompt, which is expected since I manually tested it out. The interesting thing is I get a password prompt for the admin endpoint. The service on port 8000 appears to look for login credentials. This might be what the task is referring referring to about fuzzing passwords. To test this out, I created a brute force Python script that will use admin as the username and a password list to attempt to guess the password. I'll run the following command shown in the CLI to brute force the service on port 8000. After running the command, I get the following output. It looks like my brute force script discovered the password as ABC123. There is also a server message stating welcome admin, type shell to begin. Now I need to verify that my fuzzer and brute force scripts were correct. I'll run the following command shown in the CLI to connect to the target host on port 8000. I get a session and I type admin, and I actually do get a password prompt. Let's try the password. After entering the password from my brute force script, I do get a server prompt. Welcome admin, type shell to begin. Let's type shell and see what happens. I typed shell and I get a hash, which is usually indicative of root. To confirm that I am root, I typed who am I, and sure enough it shows that I am root. Now that I am root, I should be able to obtain the root flag. I'll run the following command shown in the CLI to change directories to the root home folder. After changing directories to the root home folder, I ran the ls-la command to look at the contents. The output shows that the root.txt file is present. Let's take a look. I ran the cat root.txt command and the root hash is visible. And with that, I have compromised this host. In a professional pen test, I don't just pop root and end the engagement. I document everything. The client isn't paying me to prove I'm clever. They're paying me to help them fix their security posture. That means a clear, actionable report. What would I document in a report? Well, finding one, unauthenticated Python execution. I would consider that a critical. A custom TCP service running on port 8000 accepts and evaluates arbitrary Python code from an unauthenticated network client. An attacker with network access to this port can execute operating system commands with the privileges of a service account, effectively achieving remote code execution without any form of authentication or authorization. So how would I remediate this? To remediate this, I would remove or replace this service entirely. It is highly unlikely that this rat-style service is required and is more likely malware. Do not expose Python evaluation capabilities to the network. Finding 2, sensitive credentials in version control history. I'd consider that a high. Credentials discovered in the commit history of a locally accessible Git repository allowed privilege escalation from a low-privileged service account to a user with elevated pseudo permissions. The credentials were no longer in the current working files but remained recoverable through the Git history. How would I remediate this? I would audit all Git repositories for sensitive data in commit history. Use tools like Git secrets or Trufflehog to scan history. If credentials are found, rotate them immediately and consider the repository compromised. Do not store credentials in version control. Finding 3, excessive pseudo privileges. I consider that a high. The discovered user account had pseudo permissions that permitted privilege escalation to root. The principle of least privilege was not applied. How would I remediate this? I would audit pseudo configurations on all systems, grant only the minimum permissions required for each user account's function. That's the real findings section. Specific, technical, and actionable. That's a real findings section. It's specific, technical, and actionable. That's what separates a pentest report from a list of CVEs. And that's a wrap on TryHackMe Pyrat. Thank you for watching this demonstration of TryHackMe Pyrat vulnerable host. I successfully progressed through the attack lifecycle, performing reconnaissance, enumeration, exploitation, and post-exploitation. If you learned something today, whether it was the lifecycle, the Python remote code execution technique, Git forensics, or just the mindset behind how I approach the box, drop a like in the video. It genuinely helps the channel grow and lets me know what content is landing. Thank you for also checking out the Cyber Overwatch channel. If you find this content informative and you are interested in cybersecurity, please like and subscribe to the Cyber Overwatch channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I try at a minimum to post new content to the Cyber Overwatch channel monthly. I also try to cover the full spectrum of offensive security, defensive security, and everything in between. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a question in the comments, or you can send me a message from the CyberSec website listed in the description. Until next time, keep learning. The only way to improve is to keep learning. Pragmatic1, signing off.